Here we go.
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition.
Here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Hey! This is escape, then we're the pod.
Welcome back to Star Wars Escape Pod. And we've got a very special guest on the show today. Actually, two, in fact, very good friends of mine. And one of them is probably our most avid listener on the face of the planet. Or should I say in the face of the galaxy, as we're here in the Escape Pod with our co-host, Blake. And we got a look back at the Obi-Wan Kenobi show and a look forward ahead at what's around the corner, as well as 5 things, our favorite things from each of the prequels. Let's get into it.
Another happy landing.
All right, that might be the last time we hear the John Williams theme of Obi-Wan Kenobi at the start of this podcast. That is, unless we get a spinoff for season 2. But welcome back to the show.
Come on,
Reva, Star Wars story.
They could rename it that. I could see them doing a spinoff, like a Reva series.
Yeah,
right?
so
She lives at the end.
Yeah, I can see that happening. It was a last minute call, I think, on the re-edits and the scripts, but yeah, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll get into it.
Yeah, we'll get into it. Joining us on the show is Ellen and Ben. Welcome to the Star Wars Escape Pod.
Thank you so much.
Great to be back.
Yeah, and Ellen's been our number one listener for ages now.
Yeah, recently I've just always are binging Star Wars Escape Pod. Always
binging. Yeah, we need a new section. I was about to say this before we started the recording, but we need a section where every week Ellen calls in with like a few Star Wars questions. And we can call it like Questions with Ellen or something like that.
I'm
honestly, any question, usually any question kind of gets a 5-minute discussion going. So for anyone at home listening, there's a link in the description of the podcast, and you can drop a voicemail at our SpeakPipe address, or you can just email in a voice recording if that's easier. So it's always welcome. Yeah, we got to look back at Obi-Wan Kenobi because that show recently wrapped up, and it's been dominating headlines and magazine covers and everything like that, and being Ben and Ellen, of course you didn't join us for any of the reviews or after shows that we had going on, so this is a great opportunity for me to. For us to hear what you guys thought of the show. So any thoughts on Obi-Wan Kenobi? I mean, just like have at it. The mic is yours kind of thing.
And go.
I would say it was surprising how much it felt like the prequels. I was like, after the sequels coming out and they're re-ramping the prequels, I was very concerned that it was just going to feel like the sequels, but they're trying to age them and make them in the past, and I was surprised how much it felt like Revenge of the Sith just ended and it went straight into this.
Yeah,
that's a valid point, because it has felt like they've been avoiding the prequel era for like a decade now.
I mean, they did do the Bad Batch, which ties in pretty hard. I think for me, I thought it got better as it went on. I was pretty mixed on the first episode.
I would have been better if you saw Obi-Wan chopping fish and stealing it one more time.
Honestly,
I think that would have helped.
What really got me was when Leia was outrunning the bounty hunter, and I was like, I did track and field, did long distance growing up, and I used to coach little kids, and it was like more coaching, kind of like, hey, run around. They'd do like high jump and they'd run. I was in charge of helping them with running, so I'd run like games where we'd practice running, and let me tell you how slow they are compared. Like almost any adult could outrun a 10-year-old, and I was like, listen, I get it. She's good and she's an adventurous kid. But if you're telling me a paid bounty hunter cannot immediately catch a 10-year-old, I was about to be furious. And my usual policy in shows is like, if it actually affects the plot, I cared about it a lot. And there's a part where she yells help and like the guard comes. I was like, if the guard saves her, I'm actually gonna lose my mind. Like if this is about how like there's a threat and they put her on lockdown or something, I'm like, there's no way a bounty hunter can't catch a 10-year-old alone in the forest. That's absolutely mind-boggling. Anyway, but then they got caught in the end. I was like, okay, cool. She ran around for a couple seconds, whatever.
So it sounds like you share some gripes with a few of our voices on the show when we started talking about the chase scenes. I forget who was there. It was definitely Phil and
I know Phil was talking about this.
Yeah. I know Phil had some gripes with chase scenes. They just can't seem to get the chase scenes correct. Like in Boca Boba, the speeder chase, and they just always feel a bit slow or lame or something like that.
I thought the one with Obi-Wan and like the one in I forgot what planet they're at. That one was a lot better. Where's the what?
The rooftop chase scene, right?
The rooftop chase scene was way better. And I thought, I was like, I like that. I think for me, I was just like, I feel like they tried to force me to be like, look how cool Leia was as a kid. And I was like, I don't know, man. Like,
I don't buy it.
Like, yeah, like she gets kidnapped and she's like, I don't know if I want to go home. And I was like, what? Who's like, man, I just got kidnapped. I don't know yet. Like, yeah, maybe you have a little bit, like, your parents love you. You have like everything, like, yes, maybe you don't have like the perfect life and you have to go to some sit down dinners you don't want to go to. But you were literally just kidnapped and nearly killed. And now you're like, you know what? This might be better than going home. So I think that was like, okay. But I think toward like, they kind of fleshed out her character a lot more. And like with every passing episode, I thought they got more and more like serious. I think what I was a little worried, it just felt a little bit like, look, all the characters are always the best at everything. And except for Obi-Wan, who was struggling, but it felt like they just tried to put too much into a 10-year-old. And man, kids are freaking stupid. And
were they trying to show that she was force sensitive though? Like, look, she's like Anakin's kid. Like that's why she can outrun, is like she knows the force, even though she doesn't realize.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know if maybe, but like a 10-year-old, and even then, like force sensitive people should like still have a trouble against a bounty hunter. I think one who's had no training, is not aware of the force, has no weapon, and has 10-year-old freaking little legs.
Yeah.
These guys are paid. These are paid
here's
criminals.
here's the other thing to consider.
They're not very good paid criminals.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I was just about to bring that up because as you're explaining this to me, I'm kind of getting on board here. But the one thing that comes to mind is the actor that I know when I brought this up, I referenced the actor who played Needles from Back to the Future, and Needles is a bit of a dim-witted kind of character. He's not the smartest cookie on the block. And I always thought to myself, well, maybe they got him, on purpose for some reason. He's a great actor at playing like what he does, right? So maybe after hearing what you just said, it's possible maybe that was the intention. Is they're not very good at what they do, right? Like, I mean, this is a Sith Inquisitor who may not know a whole lot about the underworld and might not really have a whole lot of currency to just expend on anything, right? Like she's a slave to the Inquisitorius essentially. So maybe she doesn't really know what she's doing. She just comes across the first flea that she can find and go like, hey, you know what? You're a bounty hunter. You can track down this kid. It's no big deal. It's a 10-year-old kid. You got this, right? And then they just totally botch the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, she doesn't strike me as that good. And here's the thing is, like, it would take a lot for someone to lose to a 10-year-old in the race. And I just, that part, but here's the thing is, I didn't in the end care because it wasn't plot important. If they caught her immediately, or if there was a 30-40 second where it shows that, I think they're just trying to show that she is adventurous and athletic and she puts up a fight and she's a spunky kid, and I'm like, whatever, they showed that.
I think that it should have been more Dennis the Menace-y. Like she should have had like traps and stuff in the forest that she could like use to her advantage. Because then you could buy it, right? Like she had pre-planned because she was already out in the forest all the time.
Right. Yeah. Maybe she had a playhouse out there she was able to get up into or something. Yeah.
But
Like slingshot.
This is into the weeds though. Like this is kind of in the weeds. First episode, I was a little bit more like unsure about it, and there's a couple other things where I was like, this is kind of weird. Like I thought Reva was like when she started threatening Owen, I was like, she has no lead on this guy, and she's just randomly picking people out. Like this feels like randomly aggressive and sort of target. Like I'm okay with like a very aggressive, but I think just like I preferred it when she was more targeted toward the end. She's like, I'm doing this because I know you're close to someone. Instead of just like, random Tatooine person I might just kill. Hey-oh. It just felt weird. And I think toward the end, Reva got more menacing. I thought everyone kind of did well. And so, yeah, I thought as every episode went on, and from what I've talked to, I have a couple of friends who watched it, and they're like, what do you think of the first episode? And they're like, so the first episode was decent, not crazy. I'm like, it gets better to like a good show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was definitely the general consensus for sure, is that the show improved as the episodes kind of went on and got more rich, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. And
Obi-Wan started to feel like who he knew.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be the Reva show for the first while, and then kind of like toward the last 2-3 episodes, it definitely became the Anakin Obi-Wan show, which I also really like.
Yeah, what was you guys' thoughts on the whole kind of revisiting the brotherhood of these two characters?
I mean, I think it's arguably the strongest element of probably the prequels, and I think like there's a reason why I like that the emotional climax of episode 3 is probably like this. I would say the strongest emotional climax that Star Wars has, up there with. I think it's more than I am your father, but maybe that's just because everyone knows that in our generation before they see it. So I think that I really liked it personally.
Yeah, I liked that they explored more. It felt a little bit more of like Obi-Wan being a father to Anakin, especially with the reflection of having Leia as part of the story the entire time. So I think that was an interesting thing to look at, because I've always found it interesting in the second film how Anakin refers to Obi-Wan as a father, but Obi-Wan refers to Anakin as a brother. And I thought this show really looked at Obi-Wan being Anakin's father in an interesting way. Like, it wasn't straight up, but it like definitely reflected it. And the emotional impact of just even them at like when they see each other in the gravel pit for the first time, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. And it was so good.
Yeah, you're so right, because that's very accurate, because in Attack of the Clones there is that sort of father kind of son thing that Anakin hints at. He's like, well, you're the closest thing I have to a father, when he scolds him about the lightsaber. And that's a great thing to reference, because that was the episode that they flashed back to in the second last episode. So yeah, there really is this very quick, brief thing in the films where we get that father son vibe, and in the Clone Wars onwards through Revenge of the Sith, it's more of the brotherhood vibe. But yeah, that was a really nice touch. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, to revisit that was really cool.
Also, can we all talk about how big Owen's house is?
Yeah,
it's surprising, right?
It looks big, and it's like, I'm like, whoa, freaking moisture farming pays big. Like, what's happening here?
Oh, it's a generational home. Just add on every few years.
You dig a new hole. Yeah, dig a new tunnel somewhere. Yeah.
It looks very small up top, but it goes down deep, apparently. I was like, whoa, I didn't expect like multiple rooms.
Yeah, and it made me question when, like, it's A New Hope and he wants Luke to stay around because, one more season I can't afford it. And I'm like, your house is massive, ma'am. Like, I think you can afford it.
I mean, okay, real estate is probably pretty cheap, though.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, the real estate went down so much. They're at a negative value right now. So
yeah,
can't
it's
sell.
like in Detroit out in Tatooine. People are... you're getting robbed by Jawas and Tusken Raiders. I mean, it makes sense they have the extra room.
Yeah, it's Jabba's thugs are stealing your water.
I also didn't expect how little bit graphic it was, and for two reasons. One, just Anakin, Darth Vader force pinning Obi-Wan to the fire and just like watching him burn. I was like, well, that's kind of dark for like a classic Star Wars. And maybe because I was kind of like anticipating Clone Wars-y kind of like level of violence, even like that. But also there was blood, and previously I was under the impression that every single wound, because they're usually plasma and like a lightsaber, extremely hot, just instantly cauterize the wound, and that's how they avoid not having blood. And then I looked it up actually, because afterwards I was like, whoa, blood? What the heck? And there is some blood here or there, like there is like some blood on different parts of Star Wars, but that was the first time I was like, whoa, I see. I actually noticed the blood being on that lightsaber blast.
Right.
Yeah, it is surprising because they had to canonize Aqualish blood, which is when we see the first D-Limit in A New Hope. We see Panda Baba, he's Aqualish. His arm cut off. There's blood there, right? Because they hadn't decided that it's cauterized. So his race just their blood doesn't cauterize. They had to like canonize that.
Yeah.
That's like an excuse.
Yeah. Hey, one thing I want to get you guys' opinions about is obviously Hayden Christensen makes his famous return to Star Wars acting for the first time since Revenge of the Sith. And, I've always been a big Hayden advocate. I've always loved the guy. But he's, as many people know, been one of the more controversial actor choices, I guess, for the role of Anakin Skywalker. When the prequels were coming out, he was kind of the victim of a lot of critical flack. And I don't know what each of you what your thoughts are on him as playing the character, but was there any strong vibes about this was a great decision to bring him back as Darth Vader, and any thoughts surrounding kind of that whole aspect of the show?
I was excited to have him back. Like, I've always loved Hayden Christensen. I always thought he was a great choice, but that's probably just when I watched the prequels. I just never even knew that there was a question about it. I was at first, like the first few episodes, I was like, is he just in the suit? Like, are we ever going to see him? Like, why did they actually bring him back? And then I was excited with like just the tiny, like, oh, maybe he's like seeing him in places and the flashbacks and then at the ending, of course. But yeah, I would have been very upset if they did not bring him back, honestly. I'm a big Hayden Christensen fan for sure.
I definitely liked him in the suit. I thought his like the kind of flashback thing I thought was a little interesting, mainly because and I respected this as someone who is starting to see his hair getting lost on his head too. I was weird the flashback and his visibly seeing hair loss, and I was like, you're a little bit older, okay. But I still liked it. I was like, okay, it probably would look more natural than just killing someone else. But yeah.
Yeah, they didn't de-age him at all, which I thought was surprising. Usually they fill in a little bit of the missing hair and then just smooth out the wrinkles. But I think that was just all raw footage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which I don't know why they did if they've just been like de-aging Luke, which I think is way harder than de-aging Hayden by like 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah, you're totally right. And just to flash back to what you said there, Ellen, as well. I remember talking about this when Rogue One came out, and I mentioned it to Blake actually, and the few others that I saw the film with. And I remember thinking, why didn't they bring Hayden back to play Darth Vader? Because he was in the movie, and I remember seeing the headlines that there was just a different guy, who was brought back to do that hallway scene and do
some wrestler or something, because he was kind of like the David Prowse build, right?
Right, yeah, to do the scene with Krennic and then the back to tank sequence, and it was a very brief moments through the whole thing, but I always kind of wondered why not, right? I mean, Hayden's worn the suit before, and they were able to pull it off very well. Like, I didn't notice that he wasn't 7 feet high, and they did their movie magic and made it work, right? So now that is a thing, I hope it's encouraging for other film directors and stuff that might come into Star Wars, want to use Darth Vader, and look at the success that bringing Hayden back has been, and I hope they just decide to default to him when they do that now. because of the success of this show and just how great of a decision it was to bring it back into the show. So yeah, the doors that it opens to, I mean, it was a great call on their part. But
Question then, was Hayden always in the suit?
no,
Like the entire show?
no, he wasn't. So the one thing I'm really looking forward to is the Disney gallery on the behind the scenes of this whole thing. They've done a great gallery episodes for Mandalorian season 1 and 2 and Book of Boba so far. So I suspect in the coming weeks or months we'll probably get one of those as well for Kenobi. But one of the minor headlines I did see was that there were about 2 or 3 stunt doubles that did also wear the suit in some instances. I know for sure it wasn't him when they used some pulley system to smash him into the rock wall when Obi-Wan does his force push and stuff. Obviously, moments like that, they're not going to risk putting their star in the suit. But that being said, I don't think he was just there only to play the flashback sequence and the sequence where the helmet comes off. I think he did do some lightsaber training, of course, and he has talked about that on stage. So I do believe he was in the suit for that final battle, and potentially even the battle earlier in the show. But it really depends on the stunt and maybe what they're trying to do. If there's any kind of risk factor, they could have maybe swapped him out with one of the other team that was there to back him up. But yeah, that's a great question. That's a question I've got. I know a lot of people are probably thinking the same thing, like wondering just how much of Vader through the show that he actually played. So hopefully that Disney Gallery episode does fill us in on those matters, later on. But have you guys been watching any of the press from Hayden Christensen on YouTube? There's so many now. It's amazing.
I have heard a little about how excited he was, which made me feel really good about it. And how excited he was to come back and stuff like that. But I haven't listened to I haven't exhaustively looked at everything.
Yeah.
I watched him on Jimmy Fallon, and then I read somewhere, and I don't know if this was true, that he rewatched all of the Clone Wars, like the TV animated show.
Yeah, I heard that too. I think it was a Celebration he said that because he wanted to know the full history of the character, which is awesome.
So I thought that was really cool. I was like, because he could have just come in, he's already played the character, but the fact that he did the research up between, I thought that was super cool.
Right. Yeah, it was he's Jumper is one of my favorite movies. He's great in that movie. I don't know why it's one of my favorite movies. I just love the idea of teleportation. Have you guys seen Jumper? Have you all seen Jumper?
Never.
I saw part of it. A friend of mine really said it was really good.
It's great.
It's really good.
It's got Samuel Jackson, Hayden Christensen. It's about teleporters and people hunting teleporters, and it's fantastic. And I've recently started going through the Impulse series, which is kind of like a spin-off in the same world as the Jumper film, and by the same director and everything. And it's great. But
it's basically the plot line if basically dude survived and Hayden or Anakin had to go on the run.
Yeah, basically, yeah. It's a slightly older movie. It came out in 2008. It's actually how he met his partner, who he was with for 10 years, and had a child together. And it's based on a book, but it's very, very loosely based on a book series that has 4 books in it. But I've always thought he was just been a great actor, and he's from of course our home city, and I love supporting the idea that he's just he's one of my heroes. If I could spend a day with any actor, he'd probably be on the list. So man crush on Hayden Christensen, but Go ahead.
Sorry. I was gonna say they've been bringing back a lot of actors, and I personally listen. I love. Sorry, there's a truck behind me. I love them bringing a lot of the characters back. And here's the thing: is Mark Hamill is, I think, a terrible actor. I love him. I think he's one of the best voice actors in the world. I don't think in raw acting ability he's really that whoa, this guy is a great actor. I also think he's probably the best voice actor I can think of. I love the animated Batman. I love Avatar: The Last Airbender, of which he plays titular villains, and his voice is iconic in those. He's just not. And they decided to bring him back, and I was like, you know what? I think Hayden is a better actor, even though people gave him a lot of shade. Which, to be fair, I think some of the lines he was given absolutely no help in the prequels.
Yeah, no, I have that opinion as well.
Yeah.
Like it's real tough to be like, he was given memeable lines, and thus he became a meme.
I think Star Wars in general is like that, though. Like, there's a lot of memeable lines.
There is.
Yeah,
Let's try spinning. That's a cool trick.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it.
There was something I actually wrote down here. It was a little article I found in one of the many press conferences he's done. I think this one was with the Hollywood Reporter. He talked about his experience with George Lucas on the set of Attack of the Clones. And this is a bit of an origin story to a language which is referred to him by Wadanese. But in my opinion, I always thought that it was Huttese until I read this and didn't realize it was a different thing. So
I literally went through the exact same thing.
Yeah. So I'm gonna play a piece of audio for you guys, and just we'll talk about it in just a second. Let's take a quick listen.
Chat wara. Ting mi chasa hopa.
Kibuda, Jubana Piota, Chaza, Jedi, no bata, no toto. Ay, God.
Mi boska da Shmi Skywalker.
Lani? Lani? You are Lani! It is you! You sure sprouted, huh? You, a Jedi! What do you know?
All right, do you guys remember that part from Attack of the Clones?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so it's a funny little story, but apparently, so this is just like a quote from Hayden. He said, "I don't know that I have a scene that I was most proud of, but there's a scene where Anakin goes back to Tatooine in Episode 2 and speaks to Watto. The script had the dialogue written in English and then parentheses. It said in Wadanese. It wasn't until the day before we started filming that I went to George and I was like, what should Wadanese sound like? And he was like, well, so long as it doesn't sound like English or any other language and, might sound familiar, you can just make it up." And Christensen says this like laughingly, and so he was rushing the night before to figure out how to make up Wadanese, and that was him just improvising the whole thing, and every time he sees that scene, he gets a bit of a kick out of it. But I thought that was just such a cool story because I don't think any of us have really ever heard that from anyone. This it's a new news to me that he just invented that like the night before the filming, and to me it always sounded like it was very carefully kind of written out in a specific way to line up with a Star Wars-y kind of language, right? Because it just sounds so authentic to the universe.
Yeah, totally.
That was 100% him.
I just thought it was Huttese, which is like a well-established language in Star Wars.
Right. Yeah, because in Clone Wars we do see the Toydarians, and they never speak a native language to each other, I don't believe, if I can recall from memory.
I don't think.
But why is their language named after Watto?
Yeah. Well, I think that's just kind of the funny aspect about it. Is it's like calling the Gungan language like Jar Jarese.
Yeah.
I think it's just a behind the scenes kind of, we don't know what to call this language, so let's just name it after the character.
Like Yoda's race for the longest time.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know, but it's a cool story and it's a great tribute to just how talented the guy is. And I was very grateful that he shared that story with somebody that now it's floating around. So yeah. Is there anything you guys want to mention before we about Obi-Wan Kenobi before we slightly shift gears here?
I will say I am very worried about them doing like another one.
Right. Yes. Reva spinoff. Yeah.
Yeah. The oil. I think there's this huge reservoir. I think there is with the prequels that they kind of haven't tapped. And I think that I think most of it is in the vein of this relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan. I don't know how excited I would be of like a Leia or a Luke spinoff, but it's like I think the Anakin Obi-Wan relationship is something like that is a huge like reservoir of value. And I think after tapping that, I don't know how the longevity and the legs that it might have. But that's my only thought on it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I definitely would be very hesitant for them to do a second series. I think it was good to have a limited series. I really enjoyed it. I wish there was more episodes, but I'm glad it ended and I was satisfied with how it ended.
Mm-hmm.
It made sense for the New Hope tie-ins with like their duel again. I was like, this is good. And I don't want them to mess with it anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, 'cause that's exactly what I was going to ask. Because like, I feel like that's a big thing if they're going to do another, like a second season or not, is if it ties into New Hope well enough.
Yeah, because I think it ties in. It's not perfect. It ties in. But yeah, I really hope Disney does not see this as a money-making machine. Like, I don't know. I know this was like Book of Boba, but I was actually sad they brought back Grogu. I love Grogu. He's one of my favorite characters. I was sad they brought him back. And so, yes, I really just hope they don't second season.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. I think we all just care about the weight of these characters too much to want another story that might water down that second fight that happened, or the third fight, I guess now, that happens on the Death Star. You know, let's just stick with the 3 and leave it at that, right? So it was a very nice conclusion, a very nice goodbye between Obi-Wan and, you know, his ex-Padawan that meant so much to him. And it was just, you know what, I think we're all just kind of satisfied where it is, right? And there's always going to be those little moments that don't quite tie in, you know, and it's just the casualty of making a story between all of these other stories. There's always going to be stuff.
And there are a few minor moments that also wish we could have had. Like the final episode, I wish we had seen him moving into like his hut. Like, just a brief moment, like him like settling at the end, just like, you know, he's moved on from the cave. Because you kind of see him, like you kind of assume that's where he's going, but
right. Yeah.
But my question is, where does he get the money for the hut? Because if he's like scrounging for those 10 years, like how is it like he goes, does this adventure, and then he's like, I can afford a hut now?
I'm glad you mentioned that.
It's cheap on Tatooine.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because as we all know, there is that big massive bucket of stories out there that have not quite made it into the canon, which we refer to as the expanded universe, which is all those books and comics and galore that have come before Disney and made this conglomerate expanded universe that storytellers can reference. And what was really neat about the Obi-Wan Kenobi show was that one of the actually I think it was the director Deborah Chow and Ewan McGregor both read the Kenobi novel one of them right before and Ewan read it after. I believe he said that they filmed the first season. So I got like a small thing to read out here. I copied it down here from a site called farawaypress.com. And it says here, Ewan McGregor told Screen Rant in an interview that he'd read the novel after filming the first season. He said, I read the novel that was written called Kenobi, but I read it after this series. I don't know why, because I enjoyed playing him so much again, and I read it afterwards. It's not the story that we used for our series, but I liked that. I liked the way that he's written that story, and it's interesting, having just told a story that takes place between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, to suddenly read this novel of the same time period. In a way, it was very interesting. So you can check out the interview there. And then simultaneous with that release day interview, the series director Deborah Chow also discussed reading the Kenobi novel as part of her preparation for the series. And she says, I read Kenobi and thought Miller, the author, did a lovely job. And she says, I was trying to get a sense of what this feels like for the character at that point in his life. And while the novel is clearly set long before the TV show, it's an arrival story down to its roots. She said it influenced the tone of the show. And what's especially gratifying is that the show aligns perfectly with the novel when it came to one of the biggest decisions that he made in the book, which is that Qui-Gon would not answer Obi-Wan just yet, or in general. And the show and the book can coexist quite easily. So, you know, if anyone's got a headcanon out there, they could kind of throw that in the mix. But I thought that was kind of a cool little outtake of that interview, because there's been a lot of discussion about the Kenobi novel, one of the last expanded universe Legends novels that were written before the Disney era. And a lot of people might want to consider that as canon. And if it lines up really well with the show, there's a lot of things that could make sense still. So being earlier in the timeline, I would imagine that he doesn't quite have his hut just yet in that book. I actually haven't read it, but I imagine that that's not an infliction. So in the expanded universe, even he never really quite just went to Tatooine and paid someone for a house and boom, there he had it. I think it was always a bit of a process, to get to that point where he lives on the other side of the Dune Sea, quite far away from the Lars homestead, which is a bit curious because he went there with intentions to watch over Luke. So the show tells a really good bridge there of going from that kind of process of having to watch over this boy to him accepting the fact that he's now being raised by his family, and kind of feels like he can keep his distance a little bit more. So that is definitely a great thing to bring up. And thank you for reminding me to talk about that. So if anyone wants to read the Kenobi novel, or has read it and is shouting out stuff at home through their headphones about, the consistency of that with the show, definitely send an email about it, because I would love to hear more about it. All right, let's take a quick look at maybe these particular 5 favorite things that we have from the prequels. All right, so we've each kind of prepared a list as far as I know, and if we've not, then I'm sure you'll probably come up with it on the spot. But let's start with the Phantom Menace, and just kind of taking Obi-Wan Kenobi as a bit of a inspiration for perhaps some of the things on this list. I've come up with a few things that definitely have a huge impact on the Skywalker saga at large, things that might maybe play into the shows around the corner. Or just things that you just thought, this is what makes the movie for me, in the spirit of seeing all these flashbacks from Anakin and Obi-Wan and the kind of the return of this prequel era, because like you mentioned, Blake, I feel like it's been so long since we've had such a saturated environment where there's so much more prequel love that it might be a cool way to honor the trilogy. So.
And that long last, I have to say.
Yeah, exactly. So why don't we start with you? What's your first thing on the list? I know we might all have some shared items, and if that is the case, just chime in after when it comes up, and then we'll cross it off and then move on to the next thing. But what's your first one?
Well, I just want to open up by saying that a lot of my list is more or less stuff that I think of, or stuff that I see as transitionary, really stands out in the films. And to me, actually, the first thing I wrote down was I like the B-1 battle droids better in Phantom Menace. I felt like they were a lot more serious, and in the next 2 films, I got, in my opinion, a little too goofy. I really wish they had stayed with what they did in Phantom Menace. And maybe this is part of the fact that I actually prefer Phantom Menace to the next 2 films. So
fair enough.
Whoa, that's one of the hardest things I've heard in a while.
It has aged really well, honestly. I wouldn't have said this 10 years ago.
I just want you to say yes or no to this question, okay?
Sure.
Do you prefer the Phantom Menace to Revenge of the Sith?
I do.
That's bold.
Wow.
That's true.
I just needed that to be there.
Yeah, no, it's true.
It's definitely not the most uncommon opinion, that's for sure. I know there's a lot of people out there that have now looked at the Phantom Menace as a well-aged film, and whereas the other 2 have still kind of a little bit ways to go on their roster. But
and I feel like part of it is, like I said, there's a less serious tone in the next 2 movies, excluding obviously the Anakin turning into Vader sequence. But
yeah.
That and the fact that I think a lot of this CG has aged really poorly just because it's CG. And Phantom Menace had a lot of practical stuff.
Yeah, it definitely was that transition period of like using a lot more CG effects. And of course, we wouldn't have the world we would today without those movies, pushing that forward. Yeah. But
and they were fantastic at the time. It's just that's the nature of CG.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
As it gets better, you realize the flaws in the older stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. But yeah, no, that's a curious choice. I mean, I love the Phantom Menace, and of course the battle droids in that. That's a great one. Ellen, what's your first thing on this one?
Okay, my first one is Jar Jar. I love Jar Jar
Yes.
in Phantom Menace. Okay, it's a little bit my dad's humor is Jar Jar, so I think that's like part of the reason I love this character. But I loved in Phantom Menace, like you did have a comedy character, but it was still a very serious film.
Mm-hmm.
And like I know what you're saying of the other two films, they kind of get a little bit more goofy and such. And Phantom Menace, Jar Jar. He's a good guy.
Some good comic relief. Ben.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting twist though. Where it's like the rest of the film is quite serious, and then Jar Jar is just like off the walls.
Yeah.
I was about to say when you were like, man, Qui-Gon, like Phantom Menace is the most serious one. I was like, man.
Barring Jar Jar though, man, if you cut that out, it is for sure more serious.
I'm rewatching with that one. Then,
yeah, I'm pretty sure there are fan edits out there with just all the Jar Jars just boom, gone. Like they just literally didn't even care if it didn't make sense. They just cut every single scene out with him in it.
It's so confusing.
Yeah, exactly. The unseen Jar Jar edition. But that is a great one to bring up. I mean, as far as talking about prequel love, that definitely seems to be one of the big gripes that a lot of maybe older fans have, the ones that grew up with the original trilogy tend to have a big thing against Jar Jar. So, I'm always happy to see Jar Jar love. And now we're at the point where you can go down to the store and buy a bumper sticker with Jar Jar's face on it. And it's definitely not going to be that weird anymore. So
now people will probably just laugh and be like, I remember that.
Yeah. Now he's, that's exactly, it's like what Ben said. Now it's memeable. Now it's aged, well. it's aged in a favorable way, right? Hopefully, there's still a lot of bitter people out there, but definitely Jar Jar, I love it. Ben,
that Last Jedi fans, just another 20 years.
Yeah, just another 20 years. That's how long it takes. Ben, what's the first one on your list?
I would say and I kind of had trouble choosing this one specifically, but the general class of Qui-Gon Jinn fathering and promoting Anakin Skywalker. I think that Qui-Gon is slept on so hard. He's one of the best. I think one of the best Star Wars characters. He's not really ever there. But I think just Qui-Gon is everything that both Anakin and the Jedi Council need. I think his death is massive in the development of Anakin Skywalker and also the descent of the Jedi Council in the Republic. But I think, Qui-Gon's such a chill, earnestly looking for, he doesn't concern himself with the affairs of, politics in the Republic, which I think the Jedi Council is a little too involved in. But and I think just the fathering nature, and it's man, the question of would Anakin turn to the dark side with a father figure like Qui-Gon is one of the more interesting ones. So I think the fatherly scenes, and specifically if one scene was kind of the aftermath of Anakin going to the Jedi Council and everyone just kind of tearing him up, and he's no, believe in yourself, I got you, and promise me that you'll take him on was some of my favorite parts.
That's definitely a great one. That's actually on my list of 5 as well. Is I put Qui-Gon's death, but you're so right. The influence that he holds over the whole film, and of course over the whole saga. Yeah, exactly.
It ripples out so much.
Definitely, it can't be understated. That's for sure. I have one on my list, actually the top one on my list, which I didn't really have any particular order, but this one just ended up being the first one I put down, was young Skywalker and Padme. And the reason why I put that down is just because I don't think anyone...
Robbing the cradle.
I don't... Well, not specifically that aspect of it, but just the fact that we saw a young Anakin Skywalker in the sense that we did, right? Because of course, sometimes if Phil were here, he would say, "Oh, I hate child actors," and it's definitely not the most popular opinion, to have such an influential character like that be played by such a young person. And when
George spoke to that, he actually a lot of the producers and stuff his work with said Anakin should be older. Why are you casting such a young person for this role?
Right. Yeah, and he attests to that, but looking back and seeing how important that is to the story, I feel like having Anakin as such a young boy and being so innocent, just seeing that innocence right before he gets pulled into the Jedi life, and you have that moment with Qui-Gon where he explains to Anakin like being a Jedi is not easy. He says, and even if you succeed, it's a hard life. And he like really pushes that on it, right? He says like it's not the easiest thing in the world to be what I am, right? And he also says to Anakin, I know, right? He also says to Anakin like that Jedi aren't invincible. When Anakin kind of says no one can kill a Jedi, and is that really sweet innocence that just makes you smile. And then you have that sad kind of tragedy moment later when after Qui-Gon says, I wish that were so, and he actually does die. It adds so much to the story when you get to see these characters in this very young, kind of innocent role, right? Before all the stuff goes wrong. And it's really this lengthy process that really helps draw that story out a lot more when you see the downfall of Anakin Skywalker, who he was beforehand. Of course, with that is the very important, crucial role that Padme plays in his life as well. And that's why I ended up on my list. So let's go back to you, Blake. What's you got another one?
Well, I feel like this is a perfect segue into one of the ones that I thought was most important, and that's just the roll around Anakin in this film, where as the song "Duel of the Fates" calls out, like this movie really does. It does lead Anakin towards like this dark ending, right? Like he could have been such a prominent Jedi. He could have perhaps brought peace to the galaxy and balance to the Force, but instead, as we see through the final duel between Darth Maul and Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, that his fate is sealed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the Duel of Fates is on my list. And not only do we get a really cool, one of the most awesome lightsaber duels in the entire saga, with one of the best themes that go with it. But I mean, yeah, it's probably one of the most influential, one of the most important lightsaber duels that exists. And I'm definitely glad that's on your list as well. Yeah.
And I really feel like the person who described it the best was Dave Filoni. So I was hoping you could pull up that clip of him talking about it.
Yeah, it's going to take me a moment to bring it up, but I know where people can find it. It's on the Disney Gallery Mandalorian episode on Disney Plus. I believe it's for either season 1 or it's either season 1 or season 2. It's one of those ones. And I can't remember which one, so it'll take me too long to pull it up. But anyone who hasn't seen the Disney Galleries for the Star Wars shows, definitely give them a watch. They're a fantastic. Can't say enough good things about them. But Ellen, what do you got?
Another one, because I actually just rewatched Phantom Menace after finishing Obi-Wan. I was just surprised how much Obi-Wan disliked Anakin to begin with. Just like how cruel he is to him. And it was just like, it's so interesting to watch that and then go to the Obi-Wan series and just the weight of guilt he has that he's done the job poorly. In his eyes. And yeah, I was just I forgot that they didn't like each other at the beginning. Well, Obi-Wan didn't like him, at least.
He calls him a useless life form.
Yeah. It's kind of so mean to a little child because he is so innocent and just like so naive of the world. And yeah, Obi-Wan just kind of hates him.
Yeah,
like at least
that is kind of a nice one to pull up, because it does kind of add just another little flavor to the relationship that they have later. But yeah, when Qui-Gon first talks to Obi-Wan about how he's going back on his EOB to pick, to do something, Obi-Wan says, why do I get the feeling that we're picking up another senseless like life form? And he's referencing Jar Jar in that case, because Jar Jar, but it's just kind of a funny little quip that of course it's Anakin is a very important character, but Obi-Wan's quite reluctant. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, Ben, what do you got?
I mean, these are no particular order, but this one I just was like kind of like have on my list was from the entire like prequels was just, is this 5 from, are we doing like 5 from the entire prequels, right?
Well, this specifically Phantom Menace, but yeah, we'll move up from there. Yeah.
Okay. I was like, just reorder my list. I had my list kind of disorganized right now, just like these ones. I think mine was kind of tied, and mainly because this one was the only scene that when I first watched it, I really remember, was just like the Gungans throwing like the little balls at the droids. And this one, looking back, it wasn't that good a scene. But when I was a kid, I was like, whoa, they're just freaking throwing these little balls at robots, and I was so confused. There's something that really captured my magic of like, it was just so interesting just seeing like the robots fighting against not. I think that was just, as a kid, my favorite part. It's just like, whoa, this kind of was weird to me. And just
snowballs at them.
Yeah, I was just like, man, they're just like throwing balls at these guys. I'm like, wow, these fish guys are just throwing balls at robots, and it's like, and I'm here for it.
And you describe it like that, it just seems so ridiculous.
I think it was when I was a kid, it was just like, man, it was just so weird. It was like, it's working. I was just like, I don't know. It's just something as a kid is like the thing that stuck in my mind the most of like, oh, that was kind of like wild with like guns and shields. And it felt like everything. Maybe because it's also like, yeah, just, I just felt like, I was like, whoa, this is like this was what Star Wars was going to be like. And I kind of like, that was my introduction to it. And just, that was just as a kid, my introduction. So it was a soft spot in my heart.
Nice. That's awesome. I just for kicks, I put down the pod race on my list. I just felt like it had to be there. I don't know if you guys have it on your list, but yeah, it's on your list.
On mine.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let's give it a moment till we can talk about how awesome this scene is, because I mean, first of all, it's the reason why Anakin wins his freedom. And it saves kind of the Qui-Gon and the Queen, like their ship. He wins all the parts and the money that they need to fix their ship, but wins his freedom as well. But the pod race itself, so good. I mean, like there is no other Star Wars movie where you get such a sequence in the lengthy time that it is. That's just dedicated to George's love of racing, and I just always thought it's cool.
I think it might be the only thing in all the films that they like something big that happens that isn't like action, like they're going to like die at any moment from fighting. Yeah,
exactly. There's this real sense of energy throughout the whole race, and I don't know what like when you guys watch the pod race, like what are the feelings that you get? Do you still, even though you know what happens, are you still kind of excited like when you see it?
My feeling is Spy Kids episode 3 race scene is my number one feeling. I don't know, for me, I was just like, wow, I love racing games. I love anything that's kind of moving fast. I was just like, wow, this is pure like adrenaline and speed. And I think sometimes it's really hard to capture a fast race, just because like to make it very clear, you have to make it feel slow. And I think this one, like, it feels so fast. And you really like, actually, if I'm going to go back right now, I think that is a far better way at showing force sensitivity and skill than Leia running through the forest. And I'm going to go back to that. I think it's like a far more like, whoa, this is kind of cool, without like making other characters feel very dumb and useless. It's like, it feels like the other guys are still good, but
that's a great point to bring up, because even Qui-Gon, like, he directly says to Shmi, like, that Anakin's reflexes are not of the ordinary, right? He says that he can see things you can see things before they happen. It's a Jedi trick.
I'm the only human that can do it.
I'm the only human that can do it. No, that's a great point to bring up, because the race really showcases his affinity in the Force, right? From such a young age, and just how gifted he really is. The racers that he's going against are all alien species, and with probably heightened senses, and they always make out the humans in Star Wars to be the primitive race, even though they're like the main central point of the story.
I think there's some alien who says that they just breed too much and they just take everything over, push everyone out.
Yeah, the humans are the real parasites of the galaxy.
That's right.
Yeah. But yeah, no, the pod race is just so great. Let's.
Yeah, I think I just want to point again that because you touched on it briefly, just the American graffiti aspect on it. Like it's just so. I think it's so cool that George just loved experimenting with stuff, and just he does so well when he tries, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and he hinted about his love for his, obviously American Graffiti plays a whole lot into his career. You know, being his first kind of big movie, but. His love for cars never goes unstated in his work. I mean, you know, even in A New Hope, they always there was that whole cut sequence with Luke and his friends on Tatooine, and how they reference they're flying through Beggar's Canyon, and you know, and it's always been just this thing that has come up with some of the characters here and there that George makes. You know, even Vader, he's got his custom TIE fighter that he makes himself. You know, no one else has the same ship, and there's a lot of things there that I think he loves showcasing that. And this plays into my whole theory that Fast and Furious and Star Wars would be such a great crossover. So yeah, let's go back to you, Blake. You got anything else on your list?
Well, pod racing knocked off. I would say the next one's probably just the art design that they created for in Phantom Menace. They designed kind of the basis for the whole prequel era. Yeah. And Doug Chiang really talked about this a lot at this last Star Wars Celebration, where he was tasked with picking up where the original trilogy left off, and then all the designs that he was asked to do by George were just so radically different. He didn't think a movie was going to work, but George just had this grand scheme of how everything would flow together. So we get the cool stuff like the Naboo Starfighter he spoke to a lot, where that's supposed to be like a Formula One racing car starfighter. Like right. Everything is handmade, sort of an idea, right? As opposed to the mass-produced, say, X-Wings and the TIE Fighters we get. Yeah. I just think that just the design that they tried to apply to all this stuff, how they just really thought it through really well. And there's so many iconic designs, like thinking of the Federation donut, like control ships, right? Like where else do you see that?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so much ingenuity in designing the galaxy, and so cool to see Doug Chiang come back to Star Wars, you know, with his work in all the live action shows now. You can really tell that he's involved. Yeah. What about you, Ellen? What's next on your list for Phantom Menace?
Yeah, I think the last one I have for Phantom Menace is just how it really expanded the Star Wars universe. Like even just like Tatooine, it expanded through the pod race and like through like the city. It just really expanded what the universe was like pre-Empire, and like Naboo and then all these other planets. It just really, that movie expanded the Star Wars universe so much. And yeah, we have so much to be grateful for because of Phantom Menace, because of that.
That's a great generalist way of looking at it. I mean, you could throw midi-chlorians in the mix as well. I mean, that expands the perception of how the Force works, and you know, I know that's usually a controversial part of that movie. So that, you know, it's all just part of this greater workings, right? So yeah, that's just a great one to mention. Yeah, Ben, what about you? What's the last thing or second last thing on your list?
I think I only have one more that hasn't been said, and that was just Anakin telling his mom that he's gonna come back always made me a little sad.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think it was just like, knowing how it ends, and I know there's a lot of like, you're telling me that the entire, like, even when they talk to the Jedi that there was no money left over to just buy Shimmy, like they talk about how like, man, we have this person who's super Force sensitive, but there's this big thing that he's gonna be really scared because his mom's a slave, and that's a potential for him to come follow the dark side. And they're like, well, what if we just buy her freedom? And
the problem is, I think it's more complicated than that, because that might make him struggle with attachment even more.
Yeah, I can see that.
She could be around.
You would think that'd be a nice thing to do. You know, you'd think that they're like, hey, you know what? we were taking this kid in. Maybe we free his mom just as like a little like signing bonus or whatever. But I think it was just that, and I think that there are other things, and I think there's a really good Count Dooku quote on the Republic and the slave trade, but I just think that was always, I really like that part always made me like a little like, it's very small, just like, hey, I'll come back to you, I promise. And it kind of like it really sets up his arc well.
Yeah, and that goes back to like kind of like what the first thing on my list, which is young Skywalker. Just like the moment would be different if he wasn't that young, right? When he kind of innocently says, "Will I ever see you again?" This is a young boy who's about to never see his mom again. That's like it's a very touching moment in that movie that none of the other movies really can ever replicate. So yeah, that's definitely a great one for sure. The last thing on my list would be the Trade Federation and the politics in the Senate. I feel like The Force Awakens is a great example of how context is just so important to a story. And, getting this galactic kind of explanation for just why the Republic doesn't work anymore, how it has the weaknesses it has that allows it to crumble, and how this Republic that stood for 1,000 years gets destroyed, in like a series of events in the course of 3 years in a war. The whole Jedi Order wiped out overnight. It's just like how does that happen, right? There's got to be a plan in place.
That's such a good point.
And
it's like,
yeah, the context matters, right? And so I've always loved that, and it's usually been a point of complaining for a lot of people. It was like, oh, there's so much politics in these movies, but it's reason for stuff, right?
And I like that you put it like that, because I know when in the sequels they tried to make it as a basis really similar to the original trilogy, and you don't really hear much about the politics in the original trilogy. Like you hear there's a Senate, and you don't know how much influence they have. You just know that these guys are bad and they're in control of the galaxy, and these guys are trying to fight them. And that's what they tried to do with the sequels. But the problem was they were starting from a place where the good guys were in power.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really not explain it then, because it's just confusing. Because like, what happened to them? Why are they all gone? Like, why are we in this situation? Exactly. But if the bad guys are in control, you just carry on. It doesn't matter. You don't really have to explain it. There's bad guys, and they're everywhere.
Exactly. And that's why Force Awakens to me has always been a bit of a sore spot, because the last we saw, the good guys had just won again. They just fought for 3 movies to take the galaxy back, and then we start off from the ground zero again. And it's like, what happened? I mean, I know there's 29 years that have gone by, but I mean, it would be nice to have seen that stuff on screen. Thank you very much. So, it's just one of those
political intrigue, right?
Yeah, something, and the little bits that they had politically in there was chopped out as
I agree, Ben. Vote now.
Vote now. Yeah. Is any of you guys have any last things for Phantom Menace?
No.
All right, let's move on to Attack of the Clones here. I'll kick things off with Speeder Chase. Well done, Speeder Chase. And I think this is the number one on my list because of all the talk about these chases and these shows having not been up to expectations. Yeah, the Coruscant Speeder Chase with Kenobi and Skywalker going through the city streets. Such a great example of a good speeder chase. And
you know what?
Or just a good chase in general.
You know what the problem is? I just realized now, because this speeder chase was so good, and we hear George's line when he's talking to actors over and over again, that's what they're missing in the new series. Faster, more intense.
Faster and more intense. Yeah, that's advice that was not given to the actors on screen, I don't think. In these,
that was the problem.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And you know what? Like doing a chase scene in an environment in which they did, which was the blue screen, with today's technology, with the volume stagecraft technology. I mean, there's almost no excuse for not having a good chase scene, depending on how they decide to film it. And I think the downside to a lot of filming practically, with people running around physically with a camera or putting it on a rig or something, is that you're limited to how much space you have to actually physically have your actors run from point A to point B. So That I think has definitely been felt through the Book of Boba speeder chase, as well as the chase in the forest with young Leia. If anyone didn't like those chases, it's because it was just filmed differently than the speeder chase was in Attack of the Clones. So there are some advantages to filming on green screen still. And let's not forget, all the Marvel movies are done 100% in a green room still. So you know what? That's definitely something to keep in mind. They can still be done well. But yeah, what's the next thing on the first thing on your list, Blake?
That we finally got to see what the clone army looked like.
Oh, wait, that's a great one. Yeah.
Yeah, because we had, it would have been this point, like 30 years, where you just hear this off-the-cuff line from Obi-Wan talking to Luke, like, oh, I fought in the Clone Wars as well as your father, right?
Yeah.
And then that's all we're given. And then we finally see the Grand Army of the Republic, see all the clones and their design, and realize that they were based on Boba Fett the whole time.
This is also loosely on my list as well, and it also makes me think of that article that we read from that really old magazine, which was someone was speculating back in 1978 what the Clone Wars was. It was such a fantastic, unique article to read, and I know Darian, one of our returning group every week, he provided this magazine to me, which I've thought was just a fantastic find. So thank you again to him for providing that. That was great source material. Yeah. So anyone who hasn't listened to that, you definitely check that episode out. But yeah, definitely an eye-opening experience. I mean, the Clone Wars. Like, what is the Clone Wars? Like,
yeah, so it's 30 years of speculation, right? Like fans, I bet you people had their own Star Wars D&D campaigns based in the Clone Wars that had nothing to do with what happened.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, that's a fantastic one to bring up. Ellen, what's on your list here?
So the first one on my list is the romance between Padme and Anakin.
Nice.
So my first exposure to Star Wars was I was watching the Sci-Fi Channel where they do the Star Wars marathon, and I watched the ending of Attack of the Clones. I watched the wedding scene, and I was like, I don't know what this is, but I need to watch it. So I immediately then started watched Revenge of the Sith, which was my first full Star Wars movie. But yeah, there's just something about that romance, and then watching the Attack of Clones in full, it's just understanding how honestly toxic that relationship was, and understanding why when you finish Phantom Menace, you don't understand why Anakin really becomes Darth Vader, and watching that romance and watching even Padme can't save him when it's just.
Yeah, the forbidden love, or the forbidden fruit, I guess, being a Jedi. It's such a it is the reason why he turns to the dark side is for that, right? So yeah, that is a great one to bring up, and for a lot of people, it could be the cringe part of watching that movie.
Yeah,
but
and that's a common story. It's just the dialogue that goes through there. So
right, I'm glad you brought that up, though. I'm glad that it's on your list because it's such a sore spot for a lot of people.
Yeah, I never thought I ever would have heard someone say that's what got them into the franchise.
It honestly did. I was 12 years old, and I was like, I loved romance, and I just watched the ending, and I was like, I need to see this film.
I need to find a guy with a creepy skeleton hand.
Yeah,
that's what all girls want.
Well, I hope you live in the dream.
You guys are crossing off all the things on my list. That was on my list too. Was Anakin and Padme, the forbidden love? So
I do want to add to that because it's kind of connected. Is I think one of the best songs John Williams ever wrote is Across the Stars, which is the romance song from Attack of the Clones. It's just so good.
That's right.
It just gets me the feels every time. It's just so well orchestrated.
It's a very powerful piece. Yeah, very much. Ben, what's on yours, man?
I'm gonna preface with almost all of mine are just world building scenes. I think that's what made the prequels for me really good. Is I think the worlds felt very alive. And so my first one is just Camino. I really like. I got into Star Wars actually through playing Star Wars Battlefront 2 on my PS2. I got into most of my series through actually video games, and I loved playing as the clones. And so just the Camino scenes, also just the kind of intrigue, the mystery elements I liked, but it just felt big, and everything felt very big. How many people? And I was like, whoa, things are heating up. So I think I just really like the clones, and that was my favorite part there.
Yeah, that's a great. The world building obviously in the prequels is insane. It did wonders for the expanse of the Star Wars galaxy, and without I mean, the original trilogy does a great job at providing planets that have biomes very similar to Earth, and with the further improvements of digital technology, being able to create worlds that don't exist, just added so much. So yeah, that is a great one to bring up for sure. Is the prequels did do some insane galaxy world building that the saga kind of needed to just get to the size that it is, right? Yeah, that's a great one. I've got Count Dooku on my list because I mean, Christopher Lee. I mean, he's just such a great villain. Any fans of Lord of the Rings will attest to that as well. But he plays this. He plays a villain in which we've never really had a villain quite like Count Dooku in Star Wars before. He is a very mysterious character when we meet him, and someone who used to be a Jedi.
Respectable,
yeah,
as opposed to the over the top,
yes,
clearly evil kind of villain that we normally get.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a sense of honor in him, yeah, and he's not a broken villain like Anakin, right? And it's a broken character like Anakin Skywalker who becomes this shattered kind of monster of Darth Vader. But Count Dooku is a great example of how he just thought so differently that he was willing to leave the Order for political matters. And then he turned to the dark side because he was pulled in by all the things that come with that, right? With the selfishness and the greed. But this is a man who craves power, obviously, like anyone on the dark side. And, just a very different mindset than the standard, it makes him so different than Anakin, who is this very passionate character. And Obi-Wan kind of mentions that to Leia, that her father was quite passionate. He's a very passionate guy. And, I can't really say the same about Count Dooku. He's more of a very stoic, political-minded kind of person. So, yeah, he was on my list. He just highlights of the movie. Very famous lightsaber duel at the very end. So great curved lightsaber hilt. It all adds to the category. So yeah, that's on my list. Blake, what do you got?
My number 2 this is kind of a continuation from number 1, I guess. Is the first thing I always think of when I think of Attack of the Clones is the Battle of Geonosis.
Yeah, the Clone Wars began. That's the last thing on my list. Yeah,
it's so cool though, and like the first time we see blaster bolts are like glowing, right? You see them through the sand, shooting everywhere.
Beautiful shots. Yeah,
and this is the largest scene that I think we've ever had as far as just a full scale battle. You get some of it in Revenge of the Sith, but it's really choppy. Like you see like a shot and then you leave. Right?
It's certainly bigger than the Gungan War on Naboo. Yeah, very, very vast. Yeah.
That's just so cool. I just watched the end sequence over and over again.
Yeah.
They did those flyover videos for like desktop savers, right? Mm-hmm. It's on like Disney Plus. They should just have the Geonosis battle on the loop. So
you're right. They totally should. They should do another biome season where you witness battles from another perspective. Someone's got to send that into Disney Plus. Feedback. Ellen, what do you got?
Yeah, I've got the like creatures in Attack of the Clones. So especially like the gladiator scene with the kind of dinosaur looking thing, the rhino, and then earlier on Naboo with like the cows. I loved all of those. I just thought it definitely ties back to like Return of the Jedi with in Jabba's palace. Yeah. And yeah, it was just cool to have like new big monster creatures.
Yeah, that's definitely something. I feel like if Bryce was here, he would probably bring that up. I feel like it's definitely kind of ties into the world building experience, but really Star Wars monsters have always been a big thing ever since Return of the Jedi. I feel like, and even the Wampa, and and in the episode 4 we got the Dianoga in the Death Star and the trash compactor.
Yeah. I was gonna say episode 4 we get the Jawas.
But no, you're totally right. I mean, creatures have always been a big thing in Phantom Menace. We get the big fish, and so yeah, this was just the next iteration of adding cool monsters to the Star Wars series. So yeah, that's a great one to bring up. Blake, what do you got?
Did we miss Ben?
Ben. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Ben. Ben, what do you got?
I mean, kind of in your side, I like specifically Count Dooku, the Count Dooku and Obi-Wan like chat that they have, and stuff. I also think Count Dooku was one of my favorite characters. I think I love how kind of like I think like how like the flaws of the Republic, and I think he sees it the most clearly, where it's like, look at all the problems it has. Like they allow like a very robust slave trade under their noses. And one of my like favorite quotes, even though now it's legends, is from like a book a while back, was on how like, the main problem that like with the Jedi Order is like Yoda, and look how like entrenched they are and how like comfortable they are, and they don't see they're not looking adequately at the corruption in the Republic and stuff. And yeah, right. I think Count Dooku and Obi-Wan are just two of my favorite characters chatting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's I love the Clone Wars arc where he actually references that chat that they had on Geonosis, Count Dooku, that is. And it's such a cool acknowledgement to the fact that he tells Obi-Wan everything he needs to know to try and sway him over to his side, and it doesn't quite work the way he expects. But again, such another character moment there for Dooku, and it just adds into that whole ordeal of Dooku being such a great villain.
Yeah, because you never know in that chat whether to believe him or not.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like he's just flat out using the truth to just sway Obi-Wan over to. It's nothing deceptive. He's not trying to snake his way around people like what Sidious does. He is a flat out, this is the truth, the honest, bare bones kind of real world situation that we're in. Here you go. It gives just flat out, right? And there's no BS, there's no nothing like that. And that's what he uses to try and turn people over to his side. And that's, I think, why people love him so much. Because let's not forget, he convinces half the galaxy to follow him, politically to break away from the Republic, right? Like that's got to account for something. And he's such a crucial character when it comes to allowing the Clone Wars to happen.
I always forget that he really was the political head honcho for that.
It's in the opening crawl. Yeah, exactly. We always see him in the Sith role, but yeah, it's in the opening crawl of the movie where it says
more so Attack of the Clones.
Yeah.
The Clone Wars animated series. You actually see him being a politician at the councils of all the Federation.
Yes.
All the separatist groups.
Exactly. Yeah. The Heroes on Both Sides episode in the Clone Wars was great. That was in season 3. And I loved that lens that we got on the character because, it just adds so much more depth. But yeah, I mean, definitely going back to your thing about Obi-Wan and Dooku. Yeah. Ace moment for sure. Blake, what do you got?
So I got one that I think kind of flies under the radar unless you're a big Mandalorian fan. And this was a huge rewriting to the Star Wars mythos, and that's Boba becoming a clone.
Yeah.
Because it's 30 years of he was just this badass self-made bounty hunter to now he's just a guy walking around in his dad's shoes.
Right. Yeah. This is on your list of things that you like about the character, yeah? Or about the movie?
This was more of like a big transitionary point in the Star Wars mythos. Like it's something that I think really stands out in the film.
Yeah.
As far as like how the film affected the overall franchise. As to if I like it or not, I didn't like it when it came out, but I think with everything that's come out since then, I like it more now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's also a decision that aged well. I can feel there's definitely some backlash towards it initially, but when his father dies, he's really lost his as Jon Favreau would say, his North Star for guiding him into that position, right, of being the galaxy's biggest, baddest bounty hunter. And with all the new stories that we've had since with Clone Wars and, of course, the Book of Boba Fett and all the stories in between, it's really created this new narrative for Boba to really, so we were able to see him get to that point, and it's really made him his own character, you know, and much like how Luke is, we like Luke because of who he becomes over the course of his own story, not just because he's the son of Anakin Skywalker. You know, if that was like, it's almost like why we all tend to not like the reason why Rey is a Palpatine. I thought that, you know, and I'll have my issues with those movies, but I thought she was a good character without needing that relationship, you know? And I feel like making that relationship happen just felt forced, unnecessary, and people liked her without that being a thing. And
I think that was exactly how I felt about the initial Boba change.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's definitely nice to see stories being added to the saga that just truly kind of flesh out, you know, he's not important or liked because he's this guy's son, right? He's his own character. He's his own man. He gets there on his own, and he's different, right?
And I think the biggest thing for me that's changed over time is I think the stories that came out of him, losing his father, not knowing, like, kind of being lost in the underworld, not really knowing how to go about this persona and all this legacy that he carries. But on top of that, he's living in a galaxy where there's millions of people that have his face. Like, what a bizarre way to live.
Oh yeah. It's crazy. And it's so great that they put that in the show too, in the Clone Wars. You know, and when he's a young kid, when he's like insistent, when the others, he hates it when the others call him brother. You know, it's just like this grimace on his face. He's like, "I'm not your brother," you know, because he knows he's more. He knows he's more. He knows he's his father's son, but he hates the fact that other people share his face for sure. But it just adds to the character.
I'm just dawning on me now, but you know, the original Boba never took his helmet off. That was like his thing. That's what became the Mandalorian code or whatever.
Yeah, it might add
Maybe
into
he never takes his helmet off because he knows he just looks like a clone. He doesn't want people to see him as that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I know he hates it when the Bo-Katan's comrade in The Mandalorian, or no, it's Bo-Katan herself actually, who says, "You're not a Mandalorian. You know, you're a clone." I've heard that voice thousands of times. You can tell he doesn't like that very much. So, yeah. Ellen, let's go back to you. Do you have anything left on your list?
No, I don't have anything left for this movie.
Ben, what about you?
I had one of just the Coruscant homeworld. Not Coruscant homeworld, sorry, the Coruscant underground. I thought it was a really cool world building part in there, and like I think I really like cities that feel alive. And I thought that was I really like that. And then Anakin and the Tusken Raiders. As I said, I really like the Shmi and Anakin dynamic, and Anakin with her death, I thought was pretty good.
Oh yeah,
that was such a big scene.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that one up for sure. That's a huge part of the movie, and something that ties really well with the Phantom Menace, and that again, that young innocent boy that has to leave his mother behind, right? So yeah, really, really good scene. Such a great sequence to show off Hayden's acting ability. He does such a good job. So yeah. Blake, what's left on your list? And then we'll hit Revenge of the Sith here.
The last ones I got here are seeing that Jar Jar got demoted pretty heavily in this film. So
you liked the idea that you liked the fact that we didn't see him as much.
Or just you want to make note of it as like, hey, this is a very important part of the film.
It is, because I feel like that's more so I think the case, because it was something that I don't think was originally planned. But from the backlash of the Phantom Menace, I think George was forced to remove him from the main story arc. So he's still involved. He obviously is the fatal flaw that gives Sidious or Palpatine the supreme chancellor powers.
No, I'm kind of in the same boat in the sense, not that I've ever not liked Jar Jar, and I know you like the character as much as I do probably, but I feel like the movie would have felt very different if he was main character. Like it would not be the same movie at all. And
No, it wouldn't.
by shifting him to a back seat, it allowed us more time with the Anakin Padme relationship. It allowed us more time with Obi-Wan's investigation into the whole clone ordeal. And that's just what served the purpose of the story. So whether it was fan backlash or not that allowed that character to take the back seat, I'm just thankful that we got the movie we got. And, it is one of the longer ones. And sometimes with just how much that movie packs in, it almost feels like it could be longer to explain just a few more things, right? But yeah, it's certainly just I guess one of those things to note, I guess. It's like whether it's a positive or negative thing, definitely a more notable aspect of that film, big difference.
Yeah, for sure.
Revenge of the Sith. I mean, with the final film in the trilogy, I'm going to kick off things by saying Anakin and Obi-Wan. I mean, Ellen, I know you brought it up earlier when we were talking about Kenobi. This was one of my favorite things about the movie. I remember when the movie kicks off and we get the flying in sequence of the two Jedi on the way to rescue the Chancellor, and it really just showcased the new relationship that they had, the new dynamic that they've got in this movie, and it was quite a different feeling than the Obi-Wan that always scolded Anakin all the time for stuff. It was more of an equal relationship, and especially when we see Anakin take out Dooku, definitely changed the whole weight of who's got who's back, literally. So, yeah. What about you, Blake?
Yeah, just to go off of that, the final duel at the end, like, come on.
Yeah.
It's like the most iconic part, right? When you finally see Vader come to life, Anakin turn to the dark side, and then Obi-Wan forced to confront him. I feel like that is the movie in a nutshell, really.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Anakin's fall is definitely on my list, of course, with Order 66, the whole ordeal, and we talked about it extensively, but yeah, that's definitely one on my list. What about you, Ellen?
Yeah, my first on my list is the music of Revenge of the Sith. I think of all the Star Wars movies, I love Duel of Fates, but the music from beginning to end is so strong, and just like the emotional weight the music brings to the film, it's like, it makes me cry every time.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
just
absolutely.
so good.
It's my favorite Star Wars movie soundtrack. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree there. I can't believe that's actually somehow that slipped my mind. It ended up not being on my list, but I'm gonna retroactively put it on there. Yeah, Ben, what about you?
I think I feel bad for blowing this one a little. I know you did say Anakin and Obi-Wan, but specifically just like the end of the fight of just the pain in Obi-Wan having to leave him there and having to have him die. I think it's something that I always go back to. This specifically, just like, hey, I loved you. I just want to know that as I have to kill you. I think
Yeah, the pure tragedy in that movie is it's just endless. All this just one moment after the next, which is just like a heartbreaking downfall of this character who we all care about so much over the course of that series, and seeing what Obi-Wan has to go through, which all just makes this whole Obi-Wan Kenobi show so much more important as the end of that movie. So yeah, it's a great one. What about you, Blake?
I was gonna add, because that was also my list as well. So I was just gonna add to what Ben was saying there.
Yeah.
The fact that Obi-Wan just like leaves Anakin to burn in the lava and doesn't have the willpower to finish him off, and instead through, I guess, his inability to do what he needs to, brings this great evil onto the galaxy for like 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, to be fair, you're on this remote mining planet. You're leaving a guy with no limbs burned to death. You're never like, man, nah, he's coming back. I agree with you a little bit, but I also think that there has to be a little
that perspective, yes. But to me, it's more that Anakin, who is his brother, is there. He's burning alive and he's screaming. Yeah. And you walk away. I don't think I could do that.
I think more so it's like, he couldn't bring himself to do it, even though it probably would have been even better for Anakin to have died.
Better for everyone involved, I think.
Yeah, but even if he does die burning to death, I think that's a way tougher way to go than...
Oh, yeah, unquestionably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's definitely a crucial moment, and I feel like the first time I remember when I saw the movie for the first time in the theater, and just I had this. I don't know if any of you guys have had this feeling when watching a Star Wars movie for the first time in the theater, when something happens and you're just so overly gratified, almost like you just ran a 5-kilometer race or something like that and won first place. You know, it's just this winning moment when you see something just done right on the big screen for the Star Wars series. And I remember seeing the sequence when Vader kind of gets the suit put on after this terrible tragedy experience, and seeing that paralleled with Padme's birth of the twins, and it was just so good. And the cinematography aspect of that whole sequence, just amazing. And the music, again, going back to that John Williams soundtrack ordeal that you had on your list, Ellen, was just plays such a big part into bringing the feeling out of those sequences as well. I'm gonna put one, just a small one here, was Dooku's fall, which really is kind of the small little pebble that sets Anakin off weight. You know, finally, after all this time in the Clone Wars, seeing the buildup of this character leading to the downfall, this was just kind of one of those last little drops in the bucket to tip the scale. And it's a very brief fight, and I feel like it's not exactly a highlight of the movie for almost anyone, just because it's just so fast and it's at the beginning and they kind of just get it over with to get the story going. But I think that's why it's on my list, is because it's the thing that gets the story going. And as brief as it is, it kind of makes me think back to, I've grown to appreciate that fight a little more as time has gone by. And it makes me think of the reason why the fight between Maul and Obi-Wan later in Rebels really is so crucial and so fast, because they just know each other. These characters fight all the time. They know each other so well, the moves and everything. It just shortens the length to have it shortens the need to have a lengthy fight. And really the weight on his decision to just kill Count Dooku, who's sitting there on his knees with no hands, is a really big deal. And it's definitely not the decision that Rey decides to make when she's faced with the same decision with Palpatine standing in front of her begging her to kill him. So, you know, it's really a big character moment for Anakin Skywalker, and that's why it's on my list. And I guess we'll get back to you, Blake. Is there anything else on your list?
Okay, so I have to go back to 10-year-old Blake here. And remember when the trailer came out for Revenge of the Sith, I thought General Grievous was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my whole life.
We all.
Oh, this just like cyborg bone white robot. It was just like, it was just so cool. I had a giant poster of him on my bedroom wall. I used to just stare at it thinking it was such a cool design.
Yeah.
And it inspired me to make many lightsaber designs.
The old Clone Wars 2D show. Where he's a demon in the night just killing Jedi like it's so easy.
That's one of my biggest, like, I guess, regrets of the Star Wars franchise, is that they changed Grievous from that original version where he was just like this horror film villain. It was amazing. Like he was a Jedi killer, right? He was made for that purpose. And we don't really get that in the new animated series. I mean, I get they needed some like, you know, monster of the week kind of bad guy, and it's for a younger audience, I think, but man, it was so cool.
Yeah, he was. I love that you have such an appreciation for that character, because I've always loved Grievous as well. He's just, there's nothing else like him. You know, there's no other character like him in the saga, and he's definitely a great character to have through the course of the Clone Wars, to just pin all that the villain that we don't really have a whole lot of respect for, but we all think is really cool. And I think it allows a good reason for a villain to fail, you know, every odd week, right? Which is kind of one of the challenges. I know we've talked about it before with Vader and Rebels. You know, they wanted to use him sparingly because they didn't want to make him look incompetent all the time. But Grievous is that incompetent runaway coward, right? That Mace Windu described.
He did used to be. In fact, he was the replacement for Asajj Ventress. That was his original design. So
in the EU, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, so Asajj Ventress was Dooku's you can call it like
commander
apprentice,
or
but
whatever.
she was really more of a Sith assassin.
Yeah.
And after Anakin killed her, Grievous showed up, and he was also trained in the ways of lightsaber dueling,
Right,
through Dooku. But then in the series, they just made him this kind of a bumbling commander.
Yeah. I don't
He
like him
used to
any
be
less, though.
an
That's the
assassin.
thing. He's still really cool. I still love Grievous. But you're right. The 3D animated show definitely kind of reduced the threat level, I think, that Grievous has with the
But
Jedi.
his design is still super cool.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I love the voice too. Matthew Wood does a great job.
Kenobi!
So the last thing on my list is Yoda and Sidious. We get an echoed Duel of the Fates theme reorchestrated once again for this movie. It's played once again in this duel. And what makes this duel special for me is that the whole thing takes place in the Senate chamber. And over the course of the 3-year Clone Wars ordeal and this whole galactic downfall that happens, you see the parallel of that political crumbling in the location where this lightsaber duel is taking place between the pinnacles of light and dark. And you have those representative figures with Yoda representing the chairman of the Jedi, if you will, with Sidious representing the master of all Sith at this point. And I love that these two peaks in power have clashed in the very place in which the galaxy has been slowly deceived into ripping itself apart. And it's such a great visual storytelling, especially backed with the theme of the Duel of Fates. It's just storytelling that will always be unbelievably well thought out. What do you got, Blake? What's your next one?
Does anyone else have any other things on the list?
Yeah,
one last one.
that goes for anyone. Yeah, any last things on the list? Yeah.
I mean, I can go with mine if Blake wants to save his dramatic reveal.
You don't get let down.
Mine comes back to Star Wars Battlefront 2 because that's how I got into Star Wars, and it was just Anakin walking up to the Jedi Temple, and just I remember that scene so vividly in the game, and it was just watching it's just incredibly menacing.
Yeah, you probably love that scene in the Obi-Wan series then, hey? Right at the opening.
Yeah, the continuation of that, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, whoa, giving you the PTSD. But no, I mean, that's really sad. I really like being a clone. It was like, that was the part of the game where I played through the game multiple times. And it was always the part of the game where it's like, okay, that's the end of the clones, who were my favorite part. And I was like, I guess we're now the stormtroopers now.
Now we're bad guys.
So it was very bittersweet to me. But yeah, I think that was just the walk up the stairs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my last...
Ellen, sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say my last one on my list is just... I would say this movie really made Sidious why he was a true villain. I think it was it showed all the pieces, it connected it so well, and just how that line is always quoted, the thunderous applause is how democracy dies, and it's just the power that he was able to get, and how when the empire was started, it wasn't a sad thing for most of the population. It was a good thing for them.
Right.
And that's why the rebellion is small in the New Hope and blah blah. So yeah, I would just say this movie really made Sidious, showed why he is the ultimate Sith.
Yeah, no, totally. That's a great one.
Sithari.
I mean, a guy who was elected by the people, right?
Which also is one of my favorite parts of Obi-Wan, and just them talking about the Empire before everyone hates the Empire.
Yeah, exactly. It's the whole. I mean, I brought it up when we were talking about Phantom Menace, but this whole political aspect of the trilogy, it adds so much, and really is just such a big weight on the story that, in a good way, it's a much needed weight that the story brings to not only expanding the galaxy as a whole, but really gives context and reason for all of this stuff. War doesn't just come out of nowhere. war is caused by political powers, right? And with some reason behind why the clash is going on, and so again, seeing Palpatine come to full fruition, have that mask reveal when he faces Mace Windu, and we really see his true colors in that fight at the very end when the lightning kind of goes back full on in his face, and we get barbecue Palpatine. But it's almost like that was, I mean, it's seeing the original trilogy and what he has been. It almost makes that even more special to really see the full reveal of what we know this character to be. That's the Palpatine that is.
Did you like that transition? By the way?
I loved it. I loved it.
He lightnings himself in the face to look like he's 1,000 years old.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was really well thought out. I mean, yeah. I don't know if do you not like it or.
Well, I know I had speculated a lot with friends back home, like as the film was about to come out, and we always thought that he was using some sort of Sith force power to like disguise himself, and he really was this really old, decrepit Sith Lord.
Right, yeah.
And then we find out that he just barbecued himself.
Yeah, I guess that would reduce. Well, I guess like in the story though, I mean, that's certainly just a way to look at it, because realistically, I mean, this ugly person is what lies beneath. This ugly person is what lies beneath that very kind of well held together Senator Palpatine that people have come to like, right? And because he's not the same as Dooku, and if he was Dooku, there would be something uglier underneath. But this guy is the worst of all. He is the evil in the galaxy, and so to see this mask being peeled away with this defense of the light side is just, I don't know. It's just, I've always thought it was very good visual storytelling. But
fair enough.
Yeah, that I guess that sums up Revenge of the Sith. And
whoa! We didn't even talk about how this has the best opening of all 11 films.
Oh yeah. I mean, if that's on you, yeah, of course. I mean,
yeah, because like to me, they nailed it, especially when they get the war drums going with the classic Star Wars.
Definitely his most exciting opening.
Yeah,
so cool. Like the new films, they don't even hold a candle to it. It's hands down the best one.
It is absolutely the best opening. Yeah, the theme, like you say, that with the war drums, so good.
It's hard to find a copy of that theme. I was searching online for so long because the record they released, it just had the regular Star Wars theme. It didn't have the war drum, so I think they added that in post, like Skywalker Sound did.
Yeah. It's you can find it on YouTube. Some people have slightly removed the sound effects and the dialogue, but it's a little muddled. Still, you can kind of hear it still, but yeah, there's no official release for that version of the theme, which is too bad.
Let's pull it up. Pull it up.
Yeah. All right, just give me a second here.
It's so good. Like I don't know why they didn't reuse it more. Like it's such a cool combination that really just like sells like this giant galactic battle, because we don't really see, I think, even a space battle in that same level again. I mean, you get like the this is it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is like the opening to what people considered the final film.
Yeah, at the time it was, right? Like this was the last I remember it being marketed with the sub phrase the circle is complete. And that was what was on the box sets at Costco back in the day, like on the posters and everything.
Was that on like the box of cookies? Circle is complete.
Yeah, the circle is complete. Yeah, exactly. It was a great marketing trope or quote or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. As
I was saying there, like we don't really get a space battle on that level again. Like with that many on each side.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. There's never been a space battle quite as detailed and vast as that. I mean, I want to say the battle above Endor was quite well done as well, with all the ships flying around and stuff. But I mean, obviously the technology has improved so much, they were able to add everything, including the kitchen sink. Literally, they had a model of a kitchen sink flying and hitting one of the ships that they disguised as a missile. And yeah, it's a funny thing that they always bring up in behind the scenes, but yeah, they threw in everything.
I'm thinking Return of the Jedi. How many like cruisers do they have? Wasn't it just like they had the Mon Cal cruiser, and then just some frigates, right?
They had they had some Mon Calamari frigates, and I mean, to reference like what Ellen said, I mean, you know, it's the rebellion, right? It's a much smaller group, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, it's definitely unique seeing such a vast space battle, much like how we've never seen anything quite like the Battle of Geonosis on screen.
Yeah.
The detail and the vastness to defending the home base of the Republic. You know, there's definitely going to be a lot of people there. So that's definitely a cool battle for sure. Any last things to bring up on this one before we shift gears one more time before the end of the episode? I think that's a good one. No. Okay, sweet. So let's talk about Andor, because that's right around the corner, and you know, there's a slew of Star Wars shows coming out on Disney Plus. It's absolutely insane. I pulled up something about Andor, which I'm going to really quickly read off here. Because we're running pretty long on time here. So yeah, this says this is from one of the creators of the show revealed a bit of a plan that they have for Andor in the very recent Empire magazine that got released with the Avatar 2 cover, and Andor was featured in there as another subject that they talked about. So they said that the first season. The whole show, Cassian Andor, was going to be about the rising rebellion and the height of the Empire's powers. It's going to be a story that spans 5 years, the first year of which will be explored in the 12-episode first season, starting this August, with a now confirmed second season that also consists of 12 episodes spanning the rest of the 4 years, leaving a total of the 5-year story. Which will leave 24 episodes telling a story that takes place over the course of 5 years. That's new information that has not come out yet, but kind of exciting news and really something new that hasn't been done in a Star Wars series just yet, with this extended story taking over 2 seasons of a show. Do you guys have any thoughts on this?
I'm really curious that they're like doing 1 year being 12 episodes, and then all of a sudden it's like 3 episodes is a year. I find that really interesting. It seems a little bit like the Clone Wars animated series of doing arcs, like a 3-episode arc, which I think is interesting to kind of bring back, because I don't believe they've done that in any of the live action shows, really.
Right. Yeah. No, that's definitely a good thing. Yeah. Yeah.
How are they going to do that without? I guess it's close enough. I was going to say, like, because there's not much time gaps. How do you show someone aging that quickly? So it just doesn't feel like the next day.
Yeah. So there's some slight more detail on that. So he, Tony, I think it's Tony Gilroy, is one of the showrunners. He says the scale of this show is so huge. And then he goes on to say directors work in blocks of 3 episodes. So we did 4 blocks in season 1 of 3 episodes each. And that shooting schedule led organically into season 2's different structure, where we said, wow, it would be really interesting if we come back and we use each block to represent a year. We'll move a year closer with each block, he says. From a narrative point of view, it's really exciting to be able to work on something where you do a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday and then jump a year. For all that, it's spanning multiple years within the Rebellion and the Empire, and supporting characters including, of course, Genevieve O'Reilly returning as Mon Mothma, and Stellan Skarsgård's brand new character Luthen. The through line here remains Andor himself, with Luna promising a more character-focused story this time around, compared to, of course, Rogue One, which we didn't really get a whole lot of chance to get to know the characters. So yeah, that was the whole article. But I guess the whole story arc thing, bringing that up, I mean, that's a cool element that this show has, which none of the other shows have, like you said, Ellen, because that's something that I've always appreciated about Clone Wars was the story arc narrative, being able to prolong a story. That's something that Rebels really didn't really do, that I feel like it was a bit of a downside to not being able to tell a lengthier story week to week, just doing all these one shots every week was I don't know. I've always been a bit iffy on
exhausting.
Yeah, it's just a bit almost too fast paced, right? But that's Andor around the corner. I know, Ellen, are you're excited for this show?
I'm excited. Yeah, Rogue One is definitely my favorite movie that Disney has released. It's taking over Star Wars, so
nice. Yeah,
I'm excited to see, and also I like how much space they have of yes, they do need to tie it into Rogue One, but I'm excited to see where the storyline goes because I really don't really have much inkling on what they're going to do with it just yet. So I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, no, that's definitely Rogue One is certainly people's favorites from time to time. As I know it's other Ben's favorite Star Wars movie that Disney's done. So, Ben, what is your opinion on Andor?
I personally am a little bit worried about just overinflating the market of Star Wars TV shows, and I think the idea of 2 TV shows a year might be a bit much. It kind of takes out the specialty of it. That being said, I think it looks pretty good, and I also think that I actually like the idea of limited series, and limited not in the fact of it's limited in the fact that they're short seasons, quote unquote, but yet more. So it's not limited in the sense of number of seasons. But overall, I think it's going to be good. I mean, it's hard to prejudge something. I like the timeline of it. I really liked though a bit more looking at the world where the Empire isn't seen as the villain in the galaxy. Yeah. I think this one it's going to be. But I kind of like the before it was oh yeah, Bale is part of the Empire and he's trying to work in it, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. Yeah. Because here, Obi-Wan, they didn't actually they weren't trying to just oppress civilians. This was a Darth Vader personal hunt against Obi-Wan. Yeah. So I liked it. I think that I kind of like that idea. I don't think it's any presence. I hope they kind of have some ideas of I really like that little, I don't know, mole guy who was a big fan of the Empire, had the Empire bumper sticker on his farming tractor or something. I don't know. And I'll be honest, I did not understand how his voice worked. I was he opened this mouth. I was I don't picture that mouth being able to make those voices. Anyway, but I really like that. I thought it was cool. Hey, people like the Empire.
Yeah, it's definitely a different place in the timeline that this is the recently elected Empire that people have essentially voted Palpatine in for, right? With giving him emergency powers and being able to do what he wants with the galaxy, and like Ellen said, I mean, with a thunderous applause, people welcome the Empire at first, right? And this is a slightly different time, I guess, flashing forward to a couple years before Rogue One, leading up into it. So this is, I guess, it's after Kenobi, but I think there's a lot more grumbling people out there now at this point, and the rebellion is starting to take place already with rebel cells here and there, and now this is kind of the focus of very spy espionage. They always bring up that genre when they talk about this show, and I always loved the whole Jason Bourne, 007. I don't know if this is full on that, but the vibes that you get from those movies is kind of the same idea that this show is targeting. And I love that idea because it's not been done in Star Wars before, really. And, it's supposed to be definitely, it's going to have that gritty vibe that Rogue One had. It's also being targeted at the same audience that loved Rogue One to begin with. So Andor is certainly shaping up. After I saw the trailer, I had high hopes, and I'm definitely looking forward to it as well. So, is there anything you guys want to bring up before we wrap up here?
I'm just excited to figure out what the deal is with the hammer guy at the beginning of the trailer.
Celebrimbor.
That's right, Celebrimbor.
Yeah, I really hope they make a Solo too eventually. Completely not related. I was just something that needs to get out there. Needs to be said.
Well, I mean, that Lando series is still on the roster. I don't know if it's ever going to happen, but they announced it like a year and a bit ago, I think, as part of one of their big, huge Lucasfilm reveals, and nothing's been said about it yet. But I believe Kathleen Kennedy has only mentioned that Donald. Sorry, is it Donald
Glover?
Glover,
Donald
yes,
Glover.
thank you. Is supposed to return and play that character again. So
That'd be cool. I always liked him a lot.
Yeah, I liked him.
maybe we'll pick up with that story on when he loses the Falcon. Now he needs to find a new ship.
Yeah, that could work.
Yeah. Yeah. Ellen, is there any last things that you want to bring up?
No, I think Obi-Wan was a great series. The prequels are underrated and need to be appreciated more.
Yes.
And yeah.
Well, I'm glad. I'm thankful that you guys were able to come on and join us on the show. I mean, we've just definitely had a great time chatting tonight, and I love the fact that we were able to talk for nearly 2 hours of just about our love for episodes 1, 2, and 3, and our excitement for the stuff around the corner, and look back at Obi-Wan Kenobi. So thank you guys for coming on the show. And
thank you so much.
I guess
Of course.
we will. And Blake, you got your line coming up here, but yeah, I guess we'll see you all in another episode in the future. And Blake, we'll see you in the next one.
Sounds good. And remember, keep flying.
All right, and huge thank you to our listeners at home for, of course, tuning into this show. And I guess Ellen's faced with a bit of a decision whether or not she'll listen to this 2-hour episode again. Being one of our number one listeners, I'm sure she will. And big thank you to our guests tonight, special guests and co-host, our co-host Blake, for coming on every week. And yeah, it's been a fantastic time running this podcast over the last couple of years now. Time has flown by. We're now well past the 200 mark, and we look forward to the next 93 or 92 that we have before we hit 300. So to all of you guys who've been sharing our show, dropping those 5-star reviews, and leaving a couple nice words on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever, huge thank you to you, and keep up the great help. You guys can always follow us on Twitter at SWScape Podcast. I run that account specifically, as well as the Instagram, and you get notified of new podcast releases, as well as just the daily Star Wars thoughts. Feel free to send in a voicemail to our SpeakPipe address, which is listed in the description of every podcast in the bottom. Also, feel free to join the Discord. There's a link down there to do that. Our email is swscapepodcast@gmail.com. Any links that I mentioned in the episode will be down there with it. And just to talk about the new upcoming episode we'll have next week on the show, I believe it's our deleted scenes for the anthology films. So make sure you tune in for that as well. May the Force be with you guys, and we'll see you next time on Star Wars Escape Pod.